Oh, there we go. Okay, welcome everybody to our first morning session. I'd like to introduce Dr. Andy Young. He is a colleague of mine here in Lubbock, Texas, and he just recently retired from university teaching. He's going to be doing the things he talks about today on a full-time basis now. Dr. Young, you have the floor for the next hour.
Very good. And as we go through, if anybody has any questions, hopefully I can see them in the chat. And yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Colleen. But yeah, as I go through things, if you have questions, feel free to send them out there and hopefully I can address them. Here's all my stuff. Though my day job has been university teaching and a small private practice counseling on the side, I've spent a lot of time working with the local law enforcement agencies in my area. And I'll tell you about those different hats that I wear, but I'm with the city police department, the county sheriff's office, and every once in a while we'll get a call in which the state troopers are taking the lead on it. And I'm attached to their team as well. It's kind of fun to say I'm with the Texas Rangers. A couple other hats that I wear there. I'm a clinical director for the critical incident stress management team for the Lubbock Police and Fire Departments. We also have a regional team. And this is about trying to assist police officers and firefighters and paramedics after something bad happens. Excuse me. I'm also on the board for the Texas Association of Hostage Negotiators. That work as a hostage negotiator is probably the fun part for me, just to be able to say I'm a hostage negotiator. Kind of makes me feel sexy. Oop, there we go. I'm also a drummer in an 80s cover band. Always got to slip that in there everywhere I can. It's me and a few other professors here at the university. And I think this picture just embodies how much of a nerd we are. And that'll probably be a theme for my talk today as well. Because I'm a psych guy, this quote is important to me, and I guess it illustrates my bias. Psychology is to policing, as math is to accounting, and physics is to engineering. So for police officers, anybody who's working with people in that capacity, I don't know how you do this work without a background and understanding of psychology, communication. It's really bringing a number of fields together. But most people don't think of that at face value. Here's a little video just to illustrate my nerddom, get us warmed up this morning.
So I'm having this dream, right, where I'm a fire truck and I'm driving around the city and I know I have to put out this fire. The problem is the city is all made out of steel, so nothing's actually burning. And I'm driving around and trying to figure out what I'm doing. Dr. Young?
Oh yes, proceed. So some of the symptoms that you want to focus on, repetitive behaviors, obsessive behaviors, focusing on wearing a particular item of clothing all the time. That's a good throw. There you go, nice one. I love you, Ella. And I'll do anything for you.
Can I please wear your vest?
No.
So there you go. I never thought I would be a mental health professional. Oh, excuse me. Wearing a bulletproof vest and a helmet in some of the work I do. So again, just that overlap and coming together at different fields. Just a little bit about where I am. I'm in Lubbock, Texas, there in the upper left-hand corner. I was raised in Seattle, and so moving to Lubbock and having to live in a place like this has been very jolting to me. Though I've been here for almost 30 years, I'm still bitter about it, and so we'll probably rag on Lubbock a little bit. It's also quite boring. Explore Lubbock. Okay, done. Let's me on a horse. Everybody thinks that you ride a horse in Texas. So there's the guy from Seattle riding a horse. So a little bit, again, mostly with the Lubbock Police Department. So that'll be the point of reference through the day today. Our police department here has 435 officers for a town of 250,000, covering 120 square miles for the city limits. We're known for Texas Tech University, Buddy Holly, Growing Cotton, and our Level 1 Trauma Center. If you get wounded between Dallas and Albuquerque, you're probably coming to Lubbock for the hospital. And Lubbock is the second most conservative city in the United States. So that's an interesting sociological dynamic as well. According to FBI data, as it was considered by SafeWise, Lubbock is the third most dangerous city in the US. And so again, that background of a dangerous yet conservative, large city, anyway, so many sociological dynamics coming together. Lots of homicides in 2020. We had 3 officer involved shootings. That's another hat that I wear. A lot of people don't realize that when an officer has to use force, and especially use lethal force, that's a traumatic event for that officer as well. That individual officer is traumatized. And because I'm a counselor and carry privilege, I can meet with that officer right off the bat and try to assist them with the personal toll it takes on that individual officer when they have to use force or lethal force. And I'm happy to talk about those dynamics as well, though I was going to emphasize some other things here today. Lubbock has been named the most boring city in America, and I can attest to that. And the per capita restaurant sales seem to illustrate that point as well. And I think we have the obesity rate to go along with that. So I got started in law enforcement, if I can say I'm in law enforcement, 22 years ago this month. I was minding my own business, and the chief of police secretary came to me and said, "Hey, Andy, I heard you're working on your counseling license." The chief of police is tired of sending his officers to the same domestic dispute call over and over and over again, where there is no arrestable offense. There's nothing the cops can do, but it's taken up all our time and resources. The chief wants to get some mental health professionals out on the street with those officers at their request to try and do what you do to stabilize that family so cops don't have to keep going back to that house. Would you like to become part of the patrol division of the Lubbock Police Department? And again, because it sounded sexy, I thought I'd give it a try. So for the last 22 years, I've been doing crisis intervention and on-scene crisis counseling at the request of patrol officers at the Lubbock Police Department. This made me laugh, so I thought I'd put this in here. New definition of SWAT teams for everybody. But here's an older picture of my group of mental health professionals at the Lubbock Police Department. Varied backgrounds from social work to counseling to psych, graduate students, doctoral students, people who work with child protective services, child advocacy centers, very diverse group. But what we do on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday night is getting one of those unmarked patrol cars and patrol the city. And we've got a police radio and we got an in-car computer. And when a Lubbock police officer thinks a mental health professional might be of use at their calls, then they will call us over there. We'll show up at the call and we'll approach that officer and ask them what we can do to augment and assist them with what they got going on. And we will jump in with the skill set and resources we have to try and address the situation at hand. In 2000, the first year of our program, we had 50 calls for service. And most of those calls were domestic disputes, domestic violence kind of oriented calls. But slowly over the next few years, officers started calling us to other incidents. And last year we had 397 calls for service. Most of those calls involved a death, be it a completed suicide, a homicide, a traffic fatality, child death. Very often when someone is in that kind of crisis, that kind of grief, officers think, oh, this is clearly not a law enforcement incident. Let's call this victim services unit over to assist the people who are grieving and hurting. Now we will work and assist officers with mentally ill subjects and things like that, but then there are also other entities in our jurisdiction who will assist with that too. And so we also have learned how to play well with other groups who are out there trying to assist people, assist law enforcement, assist people in crisis. Here is our group of mental health professionals all getting to get in a marked police car and learn how to drive real fast and run over cones. If you notice, everyone here is smiling. And of course, the first thing a mental health professional does when they get in a marked police car is turn on the lights and sirens. You got to know our instructors love that. So a brief overview of our victim services team. As I mentioned, the makeup of our team and some of our equipment. We're on duty those Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights from 6 p.m. to 2:30 in the morning. Those seem to be the most busy times in our jurisdiction. But if a Lubbock police officer needs us outside of those times, that officer will call dispatch. Dispatch will call me. I will text my group of people and give them an address and a call type. And if someone is free, they will head out to that call as well. Generally speaking, our policies and procedures are all about how to work well with officers, how to assist citizens, and how to stay safe and not get hurt doing this work. And I'm very glad to say that in 22 years of having this program, no one's got injured. We haven't had any problems along those lines. And I've seen recently where some jurisdictions are adding social workers and mental health professionals, and it did not go well because of the safety component. The training for this program, everybody coming into this program needs to have an undergraduate degree or better in a mental health related field. And then they'll go through the crisis intervention training with me. And then we will also spend a lot of time helping them with the police and patrol side of things, how to use a radio, how to use a computer, how to approach a scene safely, street awareness training, how to not get into something you can't get out of. Many facets to putting a mental health professional out there on the street with law enforcement. We are part of the patrol division of the Lubbock Police Department, but we will assist detectives in investigations sometimes. Then there are other special circumstances where we might also get called out. I did a research project in 2008 just to see what the officers thought of our program and what our victims and citizens thought of our program. Actually got that published in 2008, and overwhelmingly, the police officers were thankful for people being out there who can take some of the burden and some of the load off of what they're doing and what they're not trained to do. And the citizens, of course, were very grateful for the support and guidance and advocacy that we were able to bring in many difficult and crisis situations. So let me pause here and see if that elicited any questions from anybody. Doesn't look like it has, so I'll keep going. I often get asked about payment. For me, from 2000 to 2008, I did all this work for free. I did this work for free because it was important to me, because it seemed to matter. And I think the police officers knew and noticed that, God, this guy's out here doing it for free. He's out here in the trenches with us. And that garnered not only some respect, but some trust. And with that trust came more calls. And I think that was an important part of this program getting established and utilized, because there's a difference between the two. In 2008, the city and the chief of police kind of recognized what we were doing. And so we got a contract with the city. And so now we get an hourly rate when we're on the clock, when we're doing our patrol shifts, when we're responding to calls. We'll invoice the city at the end of the month for the work we did the month prior. So it's nice to be able to give a little bit of money to everybody who's out there doing a very difficult job, trying to assist people and gain rapport with strangers in the midst of many times the worst day of their life. Other hats that I wear at the police department is training officers, training them in crisis intervention training, de-escalation, all the hot topics that are out there right now. It's kind of cute to me to see the current debate and discussion about these things when we've been kind of working on that for the last 20 years. Mental health police officer certification is a 40-hour course for police officers where they get certified by the state in psychiatric conditions, specific interventions with those in a psychiatric crisis, referral information, the judicial side of assisting those in a mental health crisis or with mental health conditions who commit crimes. Anyway, there's a 40-hour course that I get to teach that certifies officers with the state mental health police officer information. So as an educator, it is very satisfying to me to be able to educate police officers and give them the skills that come naturally through those of us who've been trained in the mental health side. There's a few old stats. I need to update those. But usually when I present on this stuff, people aren't too interested in all the stats, so I'll keep moving. As I said, I really like talking about the hostage negotiating thing. So back to 2000, I'm on the street getting called out at 3 in the morning to assist a patrol officer as they try to assist somebody who's having the worst day of their life, let's say a completed suicide or a homicide or something like that. And after about 6 months of doing that, one of the negotiating team supervisors came to me and asked if I'd like to become part of their team and become a hostage negotiator. And that really lit me up, as you can see from that video I showed you a little while ago. This made me laugh, so I put this in there. It was very interesting to me to see the overlap between what is taught to police officers in a basic hostage negotiating school and what was taught to me in a basic counseling school. The skills are the same. The background is a little, I don't know, it's not contrary, but what police officers are trained to do in the police academy and what we're trained to do and what hostage negotiators are trained to do are very different schools of thought. Police officers are trained to enter a scene and gain control of that scene and get on top of the chaos, whereas we as mental health professionals, or in this case, hostage negotiators, we're all trained in the basics of active listening and de-escalation and emotional labeling and empathy, things like that. So very different schools of thought. So I like to tell stories. So you're going to get a story this morning just to kind of illustrate all of this. When I got started in 2000 and just got started with the hostage negotiating team, it was 3 in the morning. This would be, what would that be? The fall of 2000, spring of 2001, something like that. Anyway, I got a call on my home phone. And at that time, when your home phone rang, you had to get up out of bed and go out into the kitchen and answer a phone.
I'll be back.
And answer a phone that was tethered to the wall. So it's 3 a.m. and I answer the phone. And I'm still waking up, and this voice says, "Is this Andy Young?" And I'm like, "Oh, I think it is." "Well, this is Officer so-and-so with the Lubbock Police Department. Chief so-and-so said to give you a call because we know that you're a counselor, and we have a barricaded subject who is armed and barricaded in an apartment. And the police have been called out, and we're getting set up on this thing. The chief asked me to give you a call, and he wanted you to call inside and talk to this guy while the SWAT team gets set up, because this guy has been hollering for a priest and a counselor." I was like, "Oh, okay." So they give me a phone number and they say, "So give this guy a call and try and keep him busy. Good luck." And they hung up on me. I was like, "Oh, what have I gotten myself into?" And in hindsight, this scenario, this situation that I got thrust into was not a good deal. I'm in my house by myself. I got no way to contact anybody else. I've got no information. And I learned after the fact, a long time later when I got trained in negotiating, that when people holler for priests, sometimes that's not a good thing. But luckily I was ignorant of all this stuff and was just there to help. So I made the phone call and the guy answered. And there's this angry techno music bouncing in the background, and this guy is really amped up. I say, "Hi, my name's Andy. I'm a counselor with the police department. I heard you'd like to talk to a counselor. Would you like to talk about what's going on today?" And this guy yells back at me, "Where'd you get your effing license from?" I was kind of stunned and confused. I was like, "Sir, what do you mean?" I was like, "Where'd you get your license from, you FFF, all that kind of stuff?" It's like, I was a graduate student for a while, and then I was an intern, and I took a test, and the state of Texas gave me a counseling license. "You'd like to talk about what's going on today?" And he's like, "No, you F bomb, 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 bomb. I want to talk to somebody who knows what the F is going on. Where'd you get your license from?" I went to graduate school for 2 years. I was an intern for 2,000 hours. Then I had to take a state exam and give the state $300. I'm still kind of bitter about that. And then the state gave me a license. So that's how I got my license, Texas Tech University in the state of Texas. No, you blankety blank, bomb, bomb, bomb. I want to talk to somebody who knows what the F is going on. Click. So when the guy hung up on me, I had to make a decision. Well, what am I going to do here? And I didn't really know what to do. And I was kind of freaking out. So I went back to bed, laid down, tried to figure out what the heck just happened. My home phone rang again. So I went back out and answered it again. And the voice on the other end of the phone said, Lubbock Police. I said, okay, because I thought the police were calling me back to fire me because I suck at this. And the guy starts talking. I'm like, oh, I recognize that voice. That's the bad guy. And he's got that, what's that newfangled thing called? Caller ID, where people know your phone number and they call you back. Bad guy's got my home phone number. Oh, my wife is going to kill me. The guy keeps talking and I kind of rewind the tape of our conversation. And he said, Lubbock Police Department ? And I said, yes. So he thinks I'm the police. Yee. In victim services school, they trained us, don't let anyone ever think that you're a police officer, because that's not right. And that's called a misdemeanor, impersonating a police officer. It's like, oh, my wife's going to kill me because bad guy's got my home phone number. And I've just impersonated a police officer. He thinks I'm a police officer. That's a misdemeanor. I'm going to jail. So I'm like really freaking out. I thought, well, maybe I should listen to what this guy's saying to me. And he says to me, don't come through my front door. The door's not grounded. I got C4 and explosives buried in the wall. If you come through my front door, you'll kill us all. And I was like, oh. But as they taught me in counselor school, if you don't know what else to do, your fallback position is paraphrasing. So I paraphrased back to him. Hey, it seems to me you're having a tough day and you buried explosives in your wall. And if anybody comes through the front door, that's going to make the explosives go off and everyone's going to die. And he goes, yep. I said, would you like to talk about what's going on today? And he hung up on me. I was like, what do? I don't have any way to contact the people out at the scene. I'm freaking out. I go back to my bed and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Eventually my home phone rings a third time. I go out and answer like, oh, what's going to happen now? Voice on the other end of the phone is a police officer. So I just vomit. The door's not grounded, C4 buried in the walls. He says, oh, okay, thank you for your help. How'd it go talking to the guy? And I was like, no, not very well. Well, have a good night, click. And that is the story of my first negotiator call out. The end of the story with this guy was the mentality of the department at that time was, well, if you're not going to talk to us and you're not going to be compliant, then we're going to come in. And so the SWAT team went in through the window and not the door and took the guy into custody. And that was that. He indeed did not have explosives buried in the wall. However, I don't know that we really knew that. Anyway, it was a less sophisticated way of responding to situations like that than what we would do today. So let me see if that elicited any questions. No, it looks like I'm all right. So I'll keep going. What we have here is a video from my first suicidal person who wanted to jump off a bridge call out. This gentleman is on the outside of a guardrail on an overpass that goes over a freeway. It is 20 degrees. It's blowing 20 miles an hour. We got traffic noise that makes it hard to talk. And the negotiators talking with this gentleman, they've been talking to him for about an hour and it wasn't really getting anywhere. And they told him, hey, we have a counselor who runs with us. Would you like to talk to a counselor? And he said yes. So I got the call over there and eventually made my way out on that bridge deck and stood next to those two negotiators who are police officers. And those negotiators said, hey, this is Andy, the counselor with the police department we were telling you about. We're going to give you some privacy. And they just walked off. So it's just me and this guy and this circumstance and this stress and crisis and go. And I guess I'd like to encourage you to consider, if you were thrust into a situation like that, how would you start this conversation? How would you initiate a dialogue? If I'm there coaching you and trying to help you out with this conversation, I would probably say, well, let's take this in. And even if this guy is non-communicative, verbally, he is still communicating to us. And we can probably paraphrase the circumstance and especially paraphrase the emotions that are going on with this gentleman. And so I would encourage you to start with that. Let's paraphrase this situation. Because a lot of people, when they get stressed and thrust into a crisis like this, they start asking a lot of questions. And that's usually not very helpful and sometimes can be a cognitive overload for the person in crisis. So let's slow it down. Calm is contagious. And let's see how he responds to what we put out there. So for the next 6 hours, I and the other negotiators tried to talk to this gentleman. And I was very grateful at that time that in graduate school, they told us about the circle. The circle being people in crisis will tell you about all the bad things that are happening. Like in this case, my wife left me. I'm afraid she's taking the kids. I've lost my job today. And the bottom of the circle is I want to die. So what is our job? It's to ventilate emotions and validate emotions, try to help them get to a cognitive state. And this guy would then start to think about coming down, but then people are ambivalent. Oh no, my life stinks, I want to die. Emotional labeling and ventilation, get to a cognitive state. Oh, I'm thinking of coming down, round and round and round we went. Now, most mental health professionals are not trained in the extended conversations specific to negotiating. And it would have been very good for me to have that training prior to doing this. So I don't recommend getting into this line of work like I did, which was learn on the fly and get trained later. I also was not trained on predictors of violence to self or others. So I do want to play a little more of this tape just as an illustration of that. So this gentleman is smiling, looking around and nodding, and he takes a big, deep breath. And in hindsight, those are cues that this is not going to go well. And in particular, for me, I was taught about congruence and incongruence, that emotions should typically match up with the circumstances. And when emotions and circumstances don't match up, that's a clue that something is off, or in this case, something bad is about to happen. You can see he's kind of wobbling around and he's looking around, and this is a change from the 6 hours prior, so that's a clue. So again, these movements and changes often are communication and tell us something about what's going on. And in this case, this prayerful position in a context like that is not something we like. And indeed, this ends with this gentleman deciding to fall backwards, but then changing his mind to catch himself. But he does fall and break his hip. I'm glad he didn't die. But this also illustrates that the coupling of law enforcement and mental health can lead to some situations that are very traumatic for everybody involved. And you certainly don't want to get into something that is beyond your training and expertise. So yeah, there's a little introduction to that. Let's see if I got any questions there. Yes, that was I have a comment. It was nerve-wracking to watch. Dude, it was nerve-wracking to be there, to spend 6 and 7 hours talking to this guy, giving him all my best, giving him all our best, giving him empathy and all that kind of stuff. And then for it to end poorly and to watch it end poorly. Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. I'm not going to play the rest of it because that's even worse, but yeah, I'm with you on that. I appreciate the comment. Let's see if I can forward my slide. So here's a better example. Recent call out that we had a gentleman who was in his pickup truck. He was distressed. He had his infant in the pickup truck with him, and he had a pistol. Patrol officers got there, negotiators got there, and we initiated a dialogue with him, and the guy was talking to us. And the patrol officer, who's a negotiator, who was talking to him, he forgot to shift from the patrol officer mentality to the negotiator mentality. And the patrol officer mentality is, oh, that's something I need to fix. Here's how we fix it. Whereas the negotiator or counseling mentality is very different. I ended up being the coach or the secondary negotiator on this, trying to help this officer as he talked, and just wrote on 3x5 cards little things like paraphrase or emotional label. And when that officer shifted from his patrol mentality to the active listening mentality, our subject responded very well, and this call out lasted, minutes. And it had everything to do with employing the basics in a very extreme, difficult circumstances. Anyway, there's hostage negotiating in a nutshell. That's a quick story. There on my right is a former student in the psychology department where I teach or taught. And she went on to become a police officer, and she was out there. And so this photo for me just kind of, again, embodies the two schools of thought. You got a civilian mental health guy in his vest responding to assist the police officers, and you have a psychology major who became a police officer. Anyway, it's a fun photo for me. I got a question here. Some police departments have therapists where POs are required to go to a session after a traumatic incident. Yes. And because I'm out there with these guys, they often ask if they can come and see me, because I know just from experience what they're going through. They don't have to explain a lot. They trust me because they've worked with me. So I have a lot of officers coming in for counseling of all sorts, including going to see a therapist after a traumatic event or a lethal force incident or whatever. For what it's worth, I am not a fan of mandated counseling, and I'm not a fan of mandated counseling for a population like police officers. That being said, there are times where it raises to the level of we have got to do something because this person is clearly in distress, and it is impeding many areas of their life. At this department, I think we've struck a great balance of avoiding the mandating, but still helping people. But it is an art, it's person and situation specific, and it is all built upon the foundation of a pre-existing relationship founded in trust and mutual respect and experience. So anyway, I got a lot to say about that, but there's a little bit. I appreciate your comment there. Another example of a call out working with the police. Got the U.S. Marshals going to serve a warrant on a sexual assault of a child suspect. That suspect bunkers up in a bathroom with a pistol. Marshals back out. They call the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office SWAT team and hostage negotiators to assist with this deal. Negotiators with the Sheriff's Office try to initiate a dialogue. It's not going very well. And our subject says, hey, if U.S. Marshal so-and-so is still here, I trust that guy. I'm going to talk to him. And we're like, oh, let's go find that marshal and maybe we can coach him in talking to this person. And indeed, that's what we ended up doing. So there's Andy in a bulletproof vest and helmet right up there with the SWAT guys. And I got my hand on that U.S. Marshal, and I'm coaching him as he tries to talk this guy out of the bathroom without the pistol and into handcuffs. And that is a very interesting experience to try and assist somebody who's never done negotiating before, as they try to convince somebody to come out peacefully. Yeah, it looks like I have time. I'll tell a couple of details on this one. One of the details on this one is safety. You got a guy in that residence with a pistol. Probably don't want to stick your head in there. You see Andy's right hand on the vest of this U.S. Marshal. And that Marshal, because he was so into that conversation, would start to lean his head in. And that's not a good idea when there's bullets and guns inside. And so I would pull him back. And if it really went bad and this guy started shooting at us, then I would probably have to, direct him which way to go as we transition from a de-escalation incident to a law enforcement incident, which is another thing, just side note. I don't think our society really understands, appreciates, whatever, that some things are not de-escalatable. Some things, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. If there's any questions about that, I can jump into there. But anyway, my job was to also not only coach this guy about how to have the conversation, but also kind of watch over his safety, which is a very interesting position to be in as a civilian mental health person. So anyway, at one point, this guy asked for a cigarette. And again, two schools of thought, law enforcement and negotiating, or mental health, counseling, whatever you want to call that side of things. Law enforcement likes to tell people, hey, here's how we need to do things because of the situation at hand. My school of thought, and negotiating school of thought, is as much as possible, we want to honor people's autonomy and give them the chance to come up with plans or make suggestions or whatever. And so in this case, I recommended to this marshal, hey, let's ask him, how would you like us to deliver your cigarette to you, given the situation and circumstances we have here involved? When we asked him, how would you like us to deliver the cigarette? He said, well, I know you guys need to be safe. What if you deliver me a cigarette this way? And for what it's worth, when a person you're talking to is able to consider your point of view and your needs, wants, values, and beliefs, in this case, our need for safety, that's an indicator that we have rapport. It's an indicator that we have understanding, and it's an indicator that this incident is going the right way and has a good chance of resolving peacefully. So he gives us the plan for delivering the cigarette. I turn to the SWAT commander to my left there, and he likes the plan too. So we deliver the cigarette. For what it's worth, in these situations in crisis, if you're trying to get something from somebody, like, hey, come out with your hands up and no guns, it's helpful to give something first, like here's some water, or here's a cigarette or whatever, because what does it cost us to do that? And if we're strangers to each other, you're not really going to trust me off the bat anyway. And so let's try and demonstrate our character. So you know that, hey, maybe this guy does mean what he says, and he is trying to work to help me out. So I gave him a cigarette, and, eventually as people de-escalate and become more rational, then we can kind of have a rational conversation. And so he said to this gentleman, hey, you can't stay in there forever, right? And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to go to jail. Ah, man. When you're ready to come out, we'll just go over to the back of my pickup truck. We'll have another cigarette, and we'll keep talking like we're talking now. And that helps people, kind of get forward thinking, even though they don't like what their future holds. Let me start to embrace it and accept it. And I would say about 10 minutes after that, that gentleman came out and he went to jail for sexual assault of a child. So talking someone into handcuffs is not something I ever thought I would get into, much less coaching a U.S. Marshal in doing so. But again, just to illustrate the overlap of the mental health side of things and the law enforcement side of things. Another example of trying to assist somebody in crisis. In this case, this woman stated to us that I'm bipolar. My medication isn't working. I'm wearing out my family. I'm worn out. I'm a rapid cycler and I don't know what else to do. And we tried to talk to her, but as you can see from these photos here, that talking wasn't working. And eventually we had to intervene because, again, this situation was not de-escalatable just because you only have so much power, control, or authority over another person. I would say in hindsight, this was a mistake, even though it worked. You don't want to just grab somebody because you're putting your safety at risk, and easily now we have the civilian and the other people involved all falling over the side. So though this kind of looks like a success story, I also wanted to mention how this might not be as good as it looks. Let's see if I got any questions. Looks like I'm good. Had a call out in my neighborhood, and through the course of this call out, it seemed pretty clear to everyone that she had borderline personality disorder. Imagine everybody in this group here is up to speed on borderline and what that meant. So this was a complicated negotiation with manipulation and relational drama and between our subject and us. But this photo was taken from the vantage point of my family because, again, this was 1 block from my house. So again, the interesting connection, geographically speaking, of law enforcement and mental health. But as you can tell, I love my vest. So any chance to show off me walking around in my vest, I'm going to do that. If my kids are eating dinner and like, we're not going to eat the broccoli, then I'm going to put my vest and helmet on. And we're going to negotiate the broccoli, and I'll be there for hours because I love this stuff. Looks like I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to kind of hit fast forward here and just show you a few pictures. Got a guy up on top of a parking garage. And the comment that I saw earlier, how did you say it? That was nerve-wracking to watch. Get a load of this. This was an hour that was extremely nerve-wracking to us. But this photo to me really illustrates people in crisis and what that experience is like. I am literally on the edge and I am overwhelmed. It is too much. But through the application of these things I've been talking about today, and being patient and talking to people, and trying to help them get a little more cognitive, meet as many of their needs, wants, values, and beliefs as possible, and coming up with a good plan for coming down, being respectful and empathetic, and everybody treat people like they're people, they start to come down. And when we said to this gentleman, hey, when you come down, just come over, going to come over and shake my hand. That mutual respect. That's exactly what happened. So being respectful while people are in crisis is a huge thing. Ooh, that seems like it elicited a few things. Let me see what I got here in the chat box. Do you have any insights as how to get involved in this field if interested? Yes, I do. I would encourage you to reach out to your local law enforcement agencies and to see what opportunities they have. They might not even think about using a mental health professional on their teams, but for you to initiate and say, hey, I'd like to assist insofar as my training experience would allow, and you guys are comfortable with it. So just that initial phone call, just initial reaching out. I've written some books about my experiences, and if you're interested in more of that, you can look at my books. That'll give you some more answers about how I got into this field. How do you separate the crime from the individual, like in the example of the man who sexually assaulted a child in order to be empathetic, etc.? That is an excellent question. As a therapist, I had to learn to do the same thing, that some people come and talk to me about things, and some people are the type of person that, man, I don't agree with, I don't like, whatever. But I've had to learn, and we have to put aside our judgments and try and get in touch with the person. And when you get in touch with the person, it's much easier to be empathetic. And so even though this sexual assault of a child suspect did things that are abhorrent and totally other than things that I can accept, I can look for the person inside. And for what it's worth, when people do those behaviors, it usually comes from somewhere. Well, where did it come from? I imagine he saw it. Maybe he experienced it too. Anyway, there are ways cognitively and relationally to look at a person and to push aside judgment that can help you. All right, well, here's the part where we can connect. Hopefully I answered that well enough. What are the conversations like once they come down? That's a great question. So this gentleman came over, he shook our hand, and we sat down on the pavement and we continued the conversation that we were having while he was up on the ledge. And then we add the other things like, well, here's what's going to happen next. And one of the things that this gentleman was asking for was, hey, I want to talk to so-and-so. And so we found so-and-so and brought so-and-so over so they could have that conversation. But generally speaking, we just want continuity. And we want to talk to this person like we're going to see him again. We're not going to lie to him. We want to continue to build that relationship and build that rapport in case, they go to the inpatient psych ward or whatever, and they kick them loose in a few hours. I don't know if you know this, our mental health system is not fully functional. So anyway, talk to this person with respect and like we're going to see him again, and with continuity with what we were just talking about. Do you take clinical notes in situations such as these, and who keeps them? No. In these crisis situations, there is no privilege. I am not a clinician, and this is not my client. I am a consultant with the Lubbock Police Department. And though my values are consistent, the application and the circumstances are very different. If I am talking to you out on your front lawn after a murder has occurred inside your house, there is no privilege, and I am wearing Lubbock Police Department stuff. Anyway, this is not a clinical situation. So yeah, I'm glad you asked that question so I could be pretty clear about that delineation. I even called the American Counseling Association lawyers and said, hey, this is what I do. How do I make sense of this stuff? And they said, oh yeah, there is no privilege there is no confidentiality when you're doing crisis intervention. But when you slip outside of doing crisis intervention into something that can be construed as therapy, well, then you want to start keeping things confidential. I have never testified. And Cody, if I end up getting subpoenaed after this presentation, I'm going to come find you. I'm going to hunt you down, buddy.
I'll work on that.
Yeah, right. So no, I've never had to testify. In the 22 years of the victim services work, we have been subpoenaed twice and only had to go to court once. And in that instance, it was because a child made an outcry of sexual abuse directly to my victim services person. And so they were the witness of that initial outcry and had to testify to that. Love the questions. And it looks like I'm getting right up against the deadline. I don't see any more. So let me sprint to the finish. One of my books about, book is a story. Can't talk anymore. This is a book of stories from my work doing crisis intervention with my local police departments. It's a crisis intervention as a victim services person, some hostage negotiator call outs, some assisting police officers on their bad day kind of stuff. Oh man, how do I practice self-care? I'll come back to that. Here's another book, mostly of negotiator stories, if you like that stuff. I also got added to the Bible for crisis negotiations, if you really want to get into that. Here's an old school command post with a train wreck in the background. I don't know if you ever assist people with their train wrecks, but anyway, it's a fun metaphor for me. Here's my contact information. So the self-care question. Oh man, I have a chorus of people in my life that I can call and say, dude, this just happened. I'm hurting, I'm shipwrecked, I'm confused, I'm whatever. Can we sit down and will you allow me to talk this through and ventilate my emotions? Will you do for me what I do for other people? And usually because of these traumatic situations, I have to talk about it multiple times with multiple people. Family, friends, some trained police officers. I have work outside of this. Used to be a professor. I get to speak about it. I'm a drummer, having that diverse portfolio as well. But at the end of the day, at least for me, trying to find a way to make sense of things that are insane and put them to bed in such a way to where I don't ruminate over them over and over again and settle my emotions. That's the goal. And it usually takes me having the humility to reach out to other people and say, dude, I got to talk through this. I need your help. You're interested in those books, Andy Young, drandyyoung.com. If there's anything that I can do for you after this presentation today, there's my email address. And hopefully I've given you a good introduction to some ways in which mental health professionals and law enforcement can assist each other. A couple other questions. Great. Is there a training site for negotiation certificates? I would send you to the state association in your area. So like Texas has the Texas Association of Hostage Negotiators. I would go to that website, see about the training that they offer, email them and say, hey, I'm a mental health professional interested in this training. What do you suggest? That will get you some training that's probably more local than what I can offer to you. Do you generally see similar people in situation? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, but if I understand the question right, I see everybody, different backgrounds, socioeconomic, racial. Crisis is no respecter of person. So college professors and doctors at the level 1 trauma center, homeless people, just everything that you can think of. That's what law enforcement is called into, and that's what I see generally. Hopefully I've answered that question. All right, looks like I covered all the questions, and I think I'm right on where Cody wanted me to land. Anything else I can do, Cody?
I think that's about it, unless we have any further questions.
I see one more pop up.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure being with you guys today. Thanks for listening to my stuff. Thanks for the feedback too. I really appreciate it, because talking to a blank screen and a non-responsive camera is not enjoyable. So I appreciate the questions and the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young.
Thank you so much. We will be posting this recording to our YouTube page. So Dr. Young, if you'd like, I can send you a copy of the presentation as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Great. Awesome. One more time, congratulations on your retirement and going to do the fun things.
I will be unbearable.